Okay, there is a film called Alive. The film is based on an event that happened where a plane crashed. A rugby team from Uruguay, and the plane crashed, and they were in the mountains in the Andes, and they had to eat each other to survive. There were a few instances of human cannibalism for the sake of survival in recent history. One of them actually was when a group of people, they made some sort of a raffle, and they decided who to kill, and then they ate them, and there was a court case about it, which always, I guess, leaves an ethical question regarding means of survival, and I guess you do the best possible option to survive, even resulting in cannibalism. This created a massive debate amongst people in the world about why is it really wrong to eat human meat? And I guess what got me interested was what would happen if, let's say, someone is in that situation and he could eat human meat. Someone who already died, so they wouldn't kill him, but he's already dead. Or let's say they could eat non-kosher, right? What would you say, or what would halacha say? What would be the ideal thing to do? Is there a reason a person should eat the non-kosher rather than eat the human flesh? I guess I'm going to start with, I guess if you want to analyze this halachically, the first thing you'd want to analyze is see which one is more severe. Let's say it's a sin to eat human meat, but it's also a sin to eat non-kosher. Which one would be a heavier sin kind of a thing, right? So there are four general opinions or attitudes towards human meat in halacha. You've got the one opinion, it's a minority opinion, that it's non-kosher meat. It's the same as animal, which is not kosher. This is also not a kosher meat. Most opinions do not follow that opinion. So the other opinion would say that the Torah says to eat animals, which is a positive commandment. So the Rambam deduces from there that being that a human is not an animal, and Torah says to eat animals, therefore you should not eat humans. So it's like it's got the equivalent weight of a positive commandment, right? You've got two categories of commandments, positive and negative. So the Rambam argues this has got a positive commandment connotation because the Torah says don't eat, and only eat animals, meaning don't eat humans. Not eating not kosher meat would be a heavier sin if we follow that opinion, because that is explicitly forbidden, as opposed to just deduced from a positive commandment. Others argue that it's even less, maybe a rabbinic enactment, or some argue that it's only like Baal Teshachtu, it's disgusting, so you're not allowed to eat disgusting foods, or it's not even a proper sin. For the sake of today, let's just assume the standard explanation that it is deduced from the fact that you're only allowed to eat animals. So it's less severe of a sin than human meat. The traditional way of looking at this halacha would be looking at the laws which would apply to a normal situation and apply to this case, right? So the Talmud says, Misha Chazobul, there's a sickness, which I don't know if it's even a real sickness. In the Talmud we find it's connected to not eating enough. So if a person doesn't eat enough, it comes with blindness and people die from this sickness. And if a person's in this situation, he needs to eat. So it's Yom Kippur, he's got this sickness, so he needs to eat. So what do you feed him? So the Mishnah says, let's say you've got nevela, not kosher meat, and you've got tevel. Tevel is the time of the Beit HaMikdash. You'd have certain food, you'd separate and give to Kohanim. Some of it even today you give to different. So before you've done that, you're not allowed to eat it. So which one's a more severe sin? Tevel is more severe than non-kosher meat, so you should feed him the non-kosher meat. And today, many rabbis say that today that's only rabbinic because we don't have a temple, and so maybe that the not kosher meat is considered more severe. The idea is we see from the Talmud, you try minimizing the sin kind of a situation. So therefore, one would assume if you try minimizing the sin, you should eat the human meat, which is, again, for the purpose of this discussion, less severe than non-kosher meat, right? Because it's only deduced from God saying don't eat, only eat animals. God doesn't say don't eat humans, so it's less severe of a religious sin. However, as you pointed out, there is a meta-halachic consideration here. I'll raise a few meta-halachic considerations both by rabbis. I don't know if we'll go through all of them. If we have the time, there's a little problem with some of them. Some of them work better, some of them not as well. But I'll just go through all of them, and maybe we can discuss some of it. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky makes an interesting argument regarding natural law. One of the 7 Noahide laws, right? There's laws for Jews, and then there are laws for, let's say, America. America's not a Jewish country. The Torah still demands of them to have a certain ethical conduct. One of them is to establish courts. Every country in the world, the Jewish religion requires non-Jews to have their own set of laws and courts. The purpose of this would be for the purpose of pursuing justice and not having anarchy. So there are certain values these governments are supposed to chase. Now, these laws aren't a part of the Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach. So it's self-understood that there's a certain ethical code of conduct which all governments and all non-Jews are supposed to be following, which were not told to them by God. This would be natural law. Every individual is required to think about ethics and morals and establish courts in their country pursuing these morals and ethics. So we see the idea that all countries are responsible to create a certain code of ethical conduct. In all countries today, it's against the law to eat human meat. Now, that happens to be factually incorrect, but let's put that aside for a second. I think his point is all humans understand it to be unethical, which I think that is correct. That being the case, he makes the argument that it might be more severe than eating not kosher meat. So the law is you should eat the less severe sin. The argument could be made that eating human meat is more severe, since that's an ethical problem. It's part of natural law to eat human meat. Did I present that case fairly? Anyone has any objections or any additions to that? Or because I have a problem with this explanation. I'm not fully convinced. Okay, so first I'll analyze his argument a bit more in depth. His argument is that we see in Judaism, I guess I'll broaden his argument. We see in Judaism from many sources the idea of natural law, the fact that ethics are something that we don't need to look at Torah to know if something's right or wrong, right? That's something we have. The Rambam, Maimonides writes that God will not only punish us for what he told us to not do, and we still did, or vice versa, but even if he didn't command it, but we should know on our own that it's wrong, he'll still punish us for such actions. So we see the idea of natural law in Judaism. The question is, I guess, on first hand, why would it be unethical to eat human meat? So I'll get there in a second, which I guess I'm open for suggestions. But also, even if it is unethical, where do we see that it would be more unethical or more wrong than something that the Torah commands against? So I'll try justifying both of these positions. I think what you're saying is correct. So I thought about this. So I actually did research outside the Jewish spectrum for this as to why would it research. I read a few articles, mainly YouTube videos, but why would it be unethical to eat human meat? And there are a lot of people who argue that it's not inherently unethical, it's just gross or wrong. And some people argue that this is a consequence of diseases, that people just refrain from eating human meat. It's not even an ethical thing. I believe the argument could be made that it is unethical to eat human meat. And I think the argument is as follows. Wherever cannibalism is around, generally it's by killing people and eating them, right? You have exceptions. So for example, with the diseases, you have the Kuru. There was an interesting story that actually happened. It was a tribe that would eat, out of respect, they would eat the brains of the person who deceased. And then they got a certain disease and 3/4 of the population died from this, so they discontinued this custom. So that it did not kill people for cannibalism. And over there, it's harder to see why it would be unethical. But in general, eating human meat, in a way, is an inherent contradiction to valuing them while they're alive, since there's a value in them being dead. So you'll end up killing people in order to eat them. But even if not, you would refrain from saving them. You would not respect them while they're alive, since there's a value in that you're incentivizing their death in a way. I think the argument could be made that at a certain time in history, let's say you'd split two categories. This is all hypothetical, right? You split two categories of people. Those which ate each other, those which didn't eat each other, at least within their own tribe, right? Those which ate each other, even if they didn't kill them, right? They've incentivized, they took away the value that we place on humans while they're alive. This would create a certain ethical standard in that society, which would be less ethical than the other group. So if these two groups...
Can you slow down on that? Because I'm not
right, so let's say you've got category A and category B. I'm going to try explaining this a bit more, right? Group A, right, they are exactly the same as group B. The only difference between the two of them is that they ate humans, they only ate animals and vegetables. And that's the only difference between the two groups. Now, the group that eats humans, right, at a certain point, it could be they'll be starting to kill each other to eat them. But even if that never happens, they will definitely refrain from saving them. As time goes on, the value this group...
Because there's benefit in them dying.
Yeah.
You're saying there's less motivation to save life.
Yes,
And therefore you're saying by basically what that means is that there's less value for human life, even if they wouldn't kill.
So what I'm saying is, over time, if it just starts with not saving them, over time, the value they place on a human life is significantly less than that of this group, which never ate the human meat, right? Now, over time, this could result in not. So the argument I'm making, if you do eat human meat, maybe in the short term, it's just not saving their life. In the long run, it's devaluing humans while they're alive, which would result in not helping each other. Not right. Now, a society which is less helping for each other is less appealing for a person that wants to join one of two groups, which means you've got a group here 1,000 years down the line. This group don't care about each other. Group A, right? They don't help each other. They're basically an unethical society. Then you've got group B. They value human life. They care for each other. They help each other. A random person wanting to join one of the two groups will more likely choose a group where his kids will be taken care of than a group where his kids won't be taken care of, simply because of the biological urge for survival, which means he wants his kids to live on. So the argument could be made that the ethics of not eating human meat is deeper than just there's something gross about human meat. There's an ethical component there, which is already a part of us in a deeper way, which is tied to everything ethical, not even just murder or being kind. Everything ethical can stem from not eating human meat. Yeah. Again, I'm willing to hear arguments. Okay, so I think I've built as good of a case as I could possibly build for Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky that it is intrinsically unethical to eat humans. And I'm not convinced, but it's an argument. It's the only argument I can think of to make it intrinsically unethical to eat humans. And therefore, it becomes almost more important than eating not kosher. So when Torah says minimize, then minimizing would be eating the not kosher, since eating human meat is worse. Now, the second part of his argument is that natural law overrides Torah law. In a way, it's true.
He's right. Animals generally do not naturally seek out humans as prey, even if you are in their habitat. Most wild animals tend to avoid human contact. Unless feeling threatened, they are protecting their young. They are starving and desperate. They have become...
Interesting.
The source of that.
ChatGPT is the source. Right. So the idea that sometimes something which is not from Torah can be more important than Torah, right? In a way, like over here, we're saying that the human meat is worse than eating not kosher. He doesn't quote any source, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. I didn't research this properly. There are multiple sources for similar ideas. None of them really equate to this. So, for example, in the setting of courtroom, right? We spoke about this last time. In the courtroom, sometimes the judge shouldn't do the right thing. The Zohar writes, sometimes a judge is punished for carrying out the correct verdict, and sometimes he's rewarded for carrying out the wrong verdict, right? So sometimes in the court, pursuing the justice overrides the Torah's mandate of the court. The reason I don't think that would be equatable to our discussion is because the Torah itself states that the purpose of the court is to pursue justice. Most examples I'll bring for such things have a caveat. So it's a very big, in yeshiva would say chiddush. It's an innovation to say that natural law would override the Torah. So I'm a bit hesitant to fully accept this argument. I'll present a second meta-halachic consideration with the same problem. The Dor Ravi was a Hungarian. I'm Hungarian, so he's a Hungarian rabbi, and he was the fourth generation from the Khatam Sofer, who was like the father of Hungarian rabbis. He made the argument that Jews, the Torah isn't going to make someone, live like a Jainist, let's say. You have to live as a normal person. You can't always walk around avoiding, killing bugs and, be an environmentalist. But the Torah does expect a Jew to live at least up to the ethical standard of his surroundings, which means as time goes on, people become more ethical. People get more in tune with what's right and what's wrong. Jews can't remain as we were 2,000 years ago. As the world evolves, we have to evolve with it on an ethical standard. Today, that all enlightened countries, he writes, he was Hungarian, he was referring to Hungary as an enlightened country, right? Soon after, they killed all the Jews, so I don't know how enlightened they were, but he's referring to European countries as enlightened countries. They all, think it's repugnant to eat human meat. The Jews shouldn't be on a lower ethical standard. And he claims this overrides the rule of selecting the heavier, meaning you're supposed to select the human meat, but we shouldn't stoop lower to that of the surroundings. It's rather to eat the non-kosher meat. Again, it's a meta-halachic consideration without any source. I don't think there's any source for this concept that this would override the sin of eating not kosher meat. Now, I want to suggest a third argument. This argument was made by Rabbi Chaim Rappaport, who lives in Edgware. And he made two arguments, and I think they both do work. They both have a small caveat, though, also.
Edgware, they eat a lot of humans.
So two arguments he made, and I think they both kind of work. They both have problems. So in halacha, what we traditionally do in cases like this is what we call a sveka. You've got two arguments, two explanations. Neither of them independently would suffice, but if you combine both, it makes a strong case. And I believe in courts today, they have a similar system where, two half evidence makes a complete or something like that. So I'll make two arguments. I'll mention the problem with both, but I believe combining the two, you've got a solid case. Both of these arguments will be arguing that you rather eat the not kosher than eat the human meat. There's a concept in Judaism called kavod habriot. I don't know if anyone over here has heard about that. Probably not, right? Kavod habriot literally translates to the respect of human dignity. So suppose someone's walking on the street and he realizes that his jacket or his pants have shatnez in them. Shatnez, the Torah says you're not allowed to mix wool and linen, kilayim. So you're not allowed to wear clothes which is sewed from wool and linen, right? Now, biblically, it's only forbidden if it's connected in a very specific way. It was sewn and different kinds of...
Sewn and woven.
It has to be all three of them, according to most rabbis. But even if it's not done that way, it's still forbidden rabbinically. So if someone's walking down the street and he's wearing clothes he's not allowed to wear, if he'll pull off his pants, everyone's going to see him naked on the street. That's going to be really embarrassing. There's a certain offense to human dignity. Human dignity, I don't know if that's an inherent ethical value. That would be more comparable to what you were saying earlier about burying the dead right? Now, human dignity is in meta-halachic considerations, right? Human dignity isn't a sin. The Torah doesn't say you should, don't disrespect human dignity. Even if it does, it still would be a self-understood value. Respecting other humans might not be an intrinsic ethical thing, but it's a value we can all resonate with, and sometimes it could override certain Torah laws. So with example of wearing the clothes, if the clothes are only forbidden rabbinically, then we say you rather retain human dignity and violate the law of wearing the kilayim, because when you'll take off your clothes to not do that sin, you'll be embarrassing humans. You'll be embarrassing yourself, you'll be embarrassing humans, and that is a value we want to respect over keeping the rabbinic law. However, if the clothes you're wearing would be biblically forbidden, would be a Torah law, because it's woven and sewn together, then in this case, we say that even if it's very embarrassing, the pasuk that we quote for this would be Ein chokhmah ve'ein tvuna ve'ein etzah. There's no wisdom, in Hungary they say chokhmes. Don't they say that in English? Chokhmes? There's no trickery. You don't play around with God. God said, don't do it. You'll be embarrassed. You'll be embarrassed.
By the way, I understood that verse differently. I understood that verse means there's no honor for wisdom and
when it comes to the place of God.
When it comes to God.
Okay, yeah, that's probably more accurate even, yes. We don't care about your dignity when it comes to God's dignity, kind of a thing. And some commentaries, right, it's better you be embarrassed in this world than in the world to come. That's it's a very harsh way of viewing it. That's the idea. So human dignity does play a role when deciding this thing. It just depends on the severity of the sin. Meaning, if it's a biblical sin, then we forego the dignity. If it's a rabbinic sin, then we don't forego the dignity. Now, even for a dead person to bury him, we're allowed to violate rabbinic laws, like jumping over a coffin if someone's a kohen. So even or to not bring a korban pesach, by not doing that mitzvah, you're doing a sin. We say to bury a dead, it's worth it. I guess the question would be as follows. It's an interesting question. You're on a plane crash in the Andes, and 30 people crashed in the plane, 20 people died, 10 people alive. You're the only Jew there. Everyone's eating a cow which died also, right? The circus cow, let's say, the elephant was on the plane, and that they killed it and they ate it. And you're the only Jew there. And now you get to choose. I can either eat the elephant or the cow or whatever, or I can eat Johnny, my friend, who died 2 minutes ago, right? Eating Johnny would be an obvious violation of human dignity, right? He deserves to not be eaten. So even if you don't mind eating him, he deserves to not be eaten. He deserves to be respected even while he's dead. That is a value which trumps any rabbinic law. It wouldn't trump a biblical law, a Torah law. If I were to eat the not kosher meat instead of eating the human meat, and suppose that was a sin, would I be doing a rabbinic sin or a biblical sin? I'll repeat the question, it's a bit nuanced, right? When the plane crashed and you'll die from starvation, right? As mentioned earlier, anything flies, right? You're allowed to eat not kosher to survive, including human meat, right? We still try minimizing whatever we could, which means we'd still prefer eating that which is less forbidden. If I do eat that which is more forbidden, what sin have I committed? Have I committed the sin of eating not kosher meat? Or the argument could be made that I ate it to survive. You're allowed to eat not kosher to survive. The only sin I did was in prioritizing that over something which is less forbidden. Right? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah.
Should I repeat the question? It's a very nuanced
biblical
question.
Versus.
I'm asking.
It's not biblical versus not eating.
I'm asking when you eat, the Torah doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that if you're going to die and you're going to eat something, eat that which is less forbidden. It doesn't say that anywhere in the Torah, right? So the argument could be made.
It's just something that makes sense.
It's just something that makes sense, right? So the argument could be made that when you're in a plane crash and anything flies, you're allowed to eat anything you want to, no matter how forbidden it is. More or less, it's irrelevant. You're allowed to eat anything, right? Mm-hmm. However, if you're already eating something, it makes sense to eat that which is less forbidden. Is this sin the same sin of eating not kosher meat? Meaning, one could make the argument, or Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, for example, seemingly would argue as follows. You're on a plane crash and you will die, so you're allowed to eat the human meat. The Torah never said you're allowed to eat the not kosher meat, since the not kosher meat isn't there for you to survive, because you could eat the human meat. Meaning, there is no pikuach nefesh, there is no survival excuse for the not kosher meat. There's only that excuse for the human meat.
That's what we said originally.
Well, so I'm making a different claim now. I'm making that maybe when you're in a survival mode, if the food you're eating helps you survive, you did not violate any sin. The Torah said you're allowed to eat whatever you want to survive. As far as standard halacha would be concerned, you'd be allowed to do a sin to avoid, you're allowed to do a rabbinic sin to avoid embarrassing someone. You're allowed to, if to retain human dignity, you're allowed to do what we refer to as an isur d'Rabbanan, a rabbinic sin, right? So what I'm asking now is, if you were to eat the animal, right, the not kosher meat, as opposed to eating the human, which I'm accepting as a sin, right? Is that a violation of eating not kosher meat? Or it's possible that you didn't violate that law because you ate it to survive. The only sin which you are doing is in prioritizing. That's a different sin. That sin is not mentioned anywhere in the Torah. That is probably a rabbinic sin.
You're not preserving the dignity of the dead human. Exactly what I'm saying.
Well, what I'm saying is that every person deserves to not be eaten when he's dead. The same way every human deserves to be buried when he's dead. So therefore, I would make the argument that if eating the animal, as opposed to eating the human, right, is only a rabbinic sin, which means you should eat the animal as opposed to the human to survive. But that's only a rabbinic law. Then the fact that the human shouldn't be eaten would override that sin. The first argument I started presenting was as follows. I want to finish the class today saying eat the not kosher meat, don't eat the human. And that's because I think it's ethically wrong to eat humans, so I want to draw that conclusion. But again, as mentioned earlier, that in itself is not a good enough argument. I need to find legitimate halachic explanations to reach that conclusion. The first argument I'm presenting is the fact that Torah values human dignity to the extent that the Torah itself tells you that it overrides rabbinic laws. If eating the not kosher meat in this scenario would be a rabbinic sin, not a biblical one, because you're eating it to survive, right? As many rabbis believe. I believe the Mabit, who was a major rabbi in time of the Shulchan Aruch, same time period, believes it's only a rabbinic sin. So if it's only a rabbinic sin, in Hungary, there's a dynasty of rabbis in Hungary, Rabbi Chaim Sofer believed that, many rabbis believe that, then I believe the human dignity of the dead person, he's not Jewish, but non-Jews also have human dignity, right? As many rabbis have pointed out, that they're also created b'tzelem Elokim, so that their dignity also overrides a rabbinic law. So you shouldn't eat him because he deserves that dignity of not being eaten, and that dignity overrides your rabbinic sin of prioritizing the not kosher over the kosher. That's the first argument I'm presenting. Where is there a problem with this argument? Some people believe, as the argument that was presented earlier by the rabbi, some people believe that it's a rabbinic sin because it's not considered survival at all to eat the not kosher meat if you could eat the human meat. So if it's not survival at all, it's a rabbinic sin, it's a biblical sin, and then human dignity wouldn't override it. So this is a good answer. According to some rabbis, it wouldn't work. I'm going to present a second argument, which also only works according to some rabbis. But again, these are major rabbis. I believe combining the two, you have a solid case. The second argument I want to present is as follows. You've got two pieces of meat in front of you. One is more forbidden. The other one is less forbidden, but there's two sins, right? So suppose I have an animal that wasn't shechted, wasn't cut properly. That's a very heavy sin. Then I've got an apple, right? In next week's parsha, we'll be reading about 3 years, right? For the first 3 years of a fruit, you shouldn't eat the fruit. So this tree has been grown from the first 3 years. In addition, it's also from Israel, and let's say it's from a tree you're not allowed to eat from because of the year or because it's supposed to go to a kohen, who knows what. So this apple has got two sins. That one has only one sin, right? The argument could be made that if the one is two sins or three sins, as opposed to one sin.
You said meat, not apple.
Well, the not kosher meat is one sin. The apple is two sins.
I thought you said 2 pieces of meat, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I did say 2 pieces of meat. You're right. So an apple and a piece of meat. The meat is very forbidden, very, very terrible, but that's only one sin. The apple is less forbidden, but it's two sins. Right. Maybe the Torah would prioritize the one sin and not the two sins, right? A good example for this would be if it's Shabbat, right? Would you feed him not kosher meat? Or would you cut an animal, shecht it on Shabbos, and then eat from that animal? The argument could be made that a shechted animal, it's a greater sin, but it's only one sin, violating Shabbat. The not kosher meat, every bite is another sin. So it's a lesser sin, but it's more in quantity. I believe the argument could be made that eating the human violates multiple sins. What sins does it violate? It violates the sin of eating that which isn't an animal. Also, according to many rabbis, there's a sin to disgrace the dead. According to many rabbis, there are many sins you could attribute to dead, whether Jewish or not. Not to mention that earlier we mentioned is an ethical sin. I don't know if that would count as an additional one, but the argument could be made that it's more sins to eat the human than to eat the not kosher meat. Meaning it's better to eat the not kosher meat than to eat the human. The argument I'm making is as follows, a one-sentence summary. The argument I'm making is as follows: I don't feel comfortable with this person in this plane crash eating the human, and I feel a lot more comfortable if he'd eat the not kosher meat. Therefore, I'm presenting two very strong cases, halachically, that it's better to eat the not kosher meat. One of them being that it's only a rabbinic sin, in which case the human dignity would override the sin. The second one being that it's more forbidden because it's multiple sins. And I believe, therefore, a person in this case should eat the not kosher meat. And I conclude my class. At this point, anyone has any additions, please